Welcome to episode number 306 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet, here at Goulet Pens in the Global HQ. And today I'm going to be talking about Earth Day a little bit, because that's coming up next week. Let's see here. What else we got going on? Some lighter alternatives to Diamine Lilac Satin. Some good starter flex pens. What's up with the Pilot Con B? What fountain pen content that I consume on my own. Helping with a cloggy shimmering ink. And answering if Laban Skeletons are eyedroppable. Plus, I'll be showing the Laban Skeleton and Formosa a little bit in a spotlight today. So I'm going to boogie on down because I have to go pick up my kids. So it's going to be a quick one, but we'll get it all in. All right, starting off with feedback, we got B. Bruggs, who says, the annex is so amazing, talking about the Air and Space Museum annex out in Dulles that I talked about last week. The shuttle with the re-entry scars is just such a special experience. The Blackbird 2, of course. Grew up in the DC area, and it's one of my favorite places. Very cool. If y'all get a chance to ever see it, go check it out. It's pretty rad. Let's see here. Osiris Golad says, lovely example. This is at 54:16 in last week's timestamp here. Lovely example of people talking past each other unintentionally. The person asking the question wrote Diamine Boreal Aurora, which doesn't exist. It's called Aurora Borealis. It's teal ink. Brian was presumably talking about Borealis Black, which is a Noodler's ink made to mimic Aurora Black, and is indeed a pun on that ink's name. You're totally right. I got my wires crossed and was thinking of the completely wrong ink. So, you know, you can't catch them all. But yes, thank you for pointing that out. I was totally wrong about that one, but, you know, anyway. What are you going to do? Let's see here. Pen Connection says, I would love to hear people's hot takes or controversial opinions in the hobby. All in good fun, of course. Wondering if you could make a video about that. Maybe an open question for the audience and then a follow-up video. I think that'd be really fun. I've had an idea to do some fountain pen hot takes for a while, but I don't know. It could be kind of interesting. I definitely don't want to stir up controversy, though, because this is not something that I find appealing in the fountain pen community, but there probably are some like more fun kind of comical hot takes. So I would love some ideas on that. Please let me know in the comments if y'all have any like hot fountain pen takes. I'm sure there are plenty out there. Let's see here. Jack Alantum says, oh no, I hope that means that they won't do away with the Mythos line. This is referring to the Visconti coming out with the Comedias, since they use the same nib as the Mythos. It's one of my favorite Grail pens, and I keep hoping that they'll do an Artemis. She is my favorite. I don't know about the Artemis, but the Mythos has been pretty popular, so I highly doubt they're going to take that away, at least not, you know, the Comedia is not like trying to replace it or anything like that. So I think you're okay there. And then last one I got is from the Gaming Kaiser. Says, when it comes to shimmering ink in flex pens, I found that in my Ahab, the Noodler's Ahab, the shimmer tends to get stuck in the feed right where the feed ends, and it ends up dumping globs of ink once it goes out again. Then again, I heavily modified the feed on mine, so take that with a grain of salt. Well, there you go. If you have a heavily modified Noodler's Ahab, maybe that'll be helpful. But yeah, that can happen. Like shimmer can build up over time. It can kind of glob up a little bit, especially on a flex pen like that. Yeah, it's like, you know, the ink is going to be flowing when you flex it out. It's maybe not flowing all the way through the end of that feed. So maybe stuff could build up there. I don't know. Or if you store it nib down, maybe the shimmer has a tendency to kind of like work its way down. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So I hadn't heard a lot of that before, but of course, shimmer and flex, it's combining two of the highest maintenance things you can deal with, but that's okay. It's still good fun, right? Let's talk about some new stuff. All right, first I got is some Colotino pens. These are fun little pens. So these are, we have some metal and some acrylic versions. I want to show these off just a little bit. They're pretty neat. I have two of the metal versions here. I have brass and I have the aluminum. The acrylic ones are much lighter, but I don't think they look as cool. So I like these dense ones. They're definitely little pocket pens. Whoops. They unthread. I keep forgetting that these pull out. So they're just friction fit in there, and they're machined really tight. So it's like they definitely have like kind of a good little snap to them. You can offset it if you want to watch the world burn. But they're pretty neat. So these are designed in Austria and made in the Czech Republic. So that's kind of neat. So it's a new brand for us. Haven't had a lot of experience with these pens, but they seem like solid little pens. They've got Schmidt nibs, so we know those well. Oh, and this one's inked apparently. I forgot about that. But yeah, it writes well. I mean, this one's a medium nib. And, you know, if you're familiar with any of the Schmidt nibs, this is a number 5 size nib on these little guys. That can be kind of fun. It's a bit small to write without it posted, but it does post, so that's kind of nice. And boy, this brass one is dense. It is very heavy, but the aluminum one is quite a bit lighter. The acrylic ones are definitely lighter. So yeah, pretty interesting little pens. You know, they're not too expensive, but they're more in the like artisanal kind of range, because I don't think these are mass produced. These are all like machined out of a single piece of metal. So, you know, that's a thing. The acrylic ones, you know, are actually a little more expensive. The metal ones, you're looking at about $150 for these. You know, prices pending whatever tariffs and stuff could happen in the future, but that's what it is right now. And the acrylic ones can either be $150 up to $195. So go check this out. They're medium nib only, but you can check them out. We have them at Goulet Pens right now. We also have the Ferris Wheel Press Marquise. Marquise or Marquis? I don't actually know how to pronounce this. I've always seen Marquis with no E on the end, but this one has an E, so go figure. Somebody can educate me better. But, you know, when it comes to like brand name stuff like this, sometimes it can be difficult because they could do things slightly differently just for the sake of it being interesting. Anyway, so I want to say it's Marquis. So interesting pens, you know, they're aluminum, so they got that nice like aluminum, you know, metal kind of not super glossy look. The design, especially from the grip into the nib, is definitely very Ferris wheel press. I don't know who makes their nibs, but they seem pretty solid. They seem very consistent. They're like number 6 size. And yeah. The design on the grip, it's not as textured as it might feel. You can definitely feel it a little bit, but it's not too bad. So these ones, I forget what nib sizes they are. Let me see my notes here. I don't have it in there, so go figure. I think it's fine in medium, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so standard international, you know, pretty straightforward. They're $165. So again, kind of in the like artisanal range, but interesting. No clip. Yeah, so we have 3 different colors. I have 2 of them right here, but you can check more of that out on gouletpens.com. Yeah, so it's kind of neat. They don't post though, no posting, but they're kind of long, so you don't really need to. Yeah, like you can probably post it if you really try, but like I wouldn't want to ruin the finish, so I wouldn't bother with it. But that's that. And let's see here, what else do we have? We have the Diamine Aero, no, Diamine, goodness, Diplomat Aero ROM. So if you watch the video interview I did with Matthias from Diplomat, we showed it off there. It's a pretty cool looking pen. You know, it's the shape of the arrow, but it doesn't have those deep cut flutes in there. It's more just like gentle lines, you know, and kind of a rectangular pattern, if you will, that goes around it. So it looks very Zeppelin-like, and it's very shiny, very fingerprinty, but it's pretty cool. $208 for that one. What else we have? We have exclusive pen from Delta that looks pretty rad. And I'm pretty excited about this because it's only $252. These are steel nibs, of course, for that price, with, you know, a Delta. These are like a full-on Delta everything pen. I guess $250 could be a gold nib pen, but usually not pens of like this size and stuff like that. So it's like a cast resin, individually turns a lot of little pieces in there. And this is part of a butterfly collection. So it's themed after the butterfly, which one is this? Flora. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, but check it out. It's beautiful looking. You know, these are made in Italy. Comes with a bottle of turquoise ink too, which is kind of cool. So it's like a green, white, teal swirled kind of resin body. Got some gold shimmer in there too. So it's a lot of depth in the material, a lot of interesting things going on. So yeah, check those out. We'll have them. I don't know for how long, because it's like a one-shot deal kind of a thing for us. But go check it out. If you like the full-on, like, no compromise Delta, but you don't want to pay for like gold nib, you just want the steel nib, this is like perfect for that. And there may or may not be more of these coming out too. It may be I mentioned collection, so I don't know, look in the future. And last but not least, I have the Platinum 3776 Mountain Mist. So this is another 3776 Century, if you're familiar with these at all. You know, the nibs are good. They're, you know, gold nibs, 14 karat, you know, like number 6-ish size. They're proprietary to the Platinum, but they are about that size. So this is a U.S. exclusive special edition. So not exclusive to us, but exclusive to the U.S. market. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So I think it's for the first time the Century has had multiple colors on one pen. I think usually it's just a standard thing, one color. But this is a multicolor, so that's kind of cool. It's very light, it's very well balanced, and it's got the, of course, slip and seal mechanism in there. So $380 for this pen. But if you like Platinum 3776, it's pretty standard. You're gonna like this pen too. So go check it out. All right, let's do a couple of company updates here with a little feature on Earth Day. All right, so first I want to mention we've got a spring sale going on right now. It's going to run through Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. And if you're watching this in the future, sorry you missed it. But if you're watching it relatively soon after this publishes, you can still catch it. So we got a link in the description you can check out. If you just go to the homepage, gouletpens.com, you'll see it there. Basically, we just have a bunch of extra inventory of some various things, and we wanted to give you all some deals and free up some, space and some cash for us to do more business things. So go check those out. We have a whole bunch of different brands, a whole bunch of different things on there. Now I want to talk about Earth Day a little bit. So, it's a little bit premature. April 22nd is Earth Day this year. So I'm publishing this a few days ahead of time, but by the time I have next week's Q&A, when I record it would be before Earth Day, but when I publish it, it will be after and no one will care. But that's okay. So really I just wanted to feature a few things about it. I'm not going to get into like the history of Earth Day and all that. But it was worth kind of noting that, we like the earth here at Goulet Pens. And, running a business, we go through a lot of supplies, and that kind of thing. So it's like, I care about this more than I used to, because I used to not be very affected by it, because as an individual human, like years ago, I worried about my own consumption, but I didn't think about it like in the bigger picture, like packaging materials and stuff like that. But, as our company's grown, we've wanted to focus on that a lot more because, we like earth and we want it to be around for a while. So, we've been in a years long effort to just use more recycled stuff or use more recyclable supplies, not use as much plastic, that kind of thing. So we've been working at that year after year. So I just want to share a few things, about us. So last year, Adam, our fulfillment manager, warehouse manager, he pulled some numbers for me, which I thought was kind of cool. So last year, around 85.9% of our orders were shipped with 100% post-consumer recycled fiber packaging. So that's pretty cool. So we're trying to use up more people's trash to generate less trash. And it's recyclable stuff too. So we're using a lot of paper, a lot of cardboard and stuff like that, which is, you can reuse that stuff a bunch. We continue to use, renewable and reusable resources. We have we get a lot of materials in too. And we actually pay additionally beyond just our regular, like a trash disposal service. We pay separately to have a whole other dumpster just for recycled materials. And so we break down boxes and we put things in there instead of throwing it in the garbage. So we're trying to do that kind of stuff, trying to, recycle what we can. And I think I mentioned we use a lot of paper stuff. So we've gone towards using a lot more paper and less plastic in the actual packaging of our products. So like the void fill, the stuff that is protecting the things. And our biggest concern when doing that was, actually making sure that it protects the products well. We don't want to be like, oh, we're using less plastic. And you'd be like, yeah, but all my stuff is broken. So, go back to bubble wrap. We use very little bubble wrap anymore. We used to be like all about it, using it all the time, but it's plastic. So try to keep that to a minimum these days. So we do, we do use some plastic, like plastic bags and stuff like that. When it comes to like leak prevention and stuff like that, you really can't use paper. It's too absorbent, but we do use some plastic there, but not much. And just some little fun facts here. Apparently there's like over 1 billion ballpoints that are thrown into the landfill every year. I've heard 1.6 billion. I don't know how 100% verified that is, but you can just imagine how many disposable pens get thrown away every year. And I don't know about y'all, but I almost never throw away a fountain pen. So, maybe I will eventually, but, I throw away very few other pens since I've gotten into fountain pens. So, honestly, just using those is helpful. And then also, you can get some recycled products as well. Like there are some recycled notebooks. Clairefontaine has some. There are definitely Clairefontaine and Rhodia. They use PEFC certified, wood. So the trees are like renewable and that kind of a thing. And there's other certifications out there. So, you can look. I don't have the list of like all of them, but there's definitely like a consciousness about that in the fountain pen world because, especially like the intentionality of using fountain pens. I feel like most of the brands that are associated with them tend to be more thoughtful about like the sourcing of their materials and sourcing of products and stuff like that. So it's a thing. So it's kind of neat. But anyway, so, Earth Day's coming up. Just, you don't have to do anything crazy, but just thought I would share a few facts with you all, just to let you know that we're thinking about it. We're thinking about you. We're thinking about the Earth. And fountain pens in general. Just use fountain pens and you're helping the Earth. So that's kind of cool. All right, let's get into some questions, shall we? All right, first question here. MH7256 says, I got Diamine Lilac Satin in my samples. Thank you, by the way. I'm guessing that was like a random sample. And was wondering what color or brand that I could purchase that would be a shade or two lighter. I like a lighter lavender. Also, what's a good beginner pen with a flex nib? I really want to try them, but not sure where to start. Okay, these are two pretty robust questions. So I have a bunch of ink options for you. I'm just going to kind of rattle them off, so forgive me. But there's some decent options for you. First of all, one thing you can do is you can go onto our site and you can filter ink colors. It's a side filter option that we have. So you go to Shop All Inks and then you can click on the filter color for purple, and that right there can help. Or you can look it up in the Nib Nook, or not the Nib Nook, Swab Shop. That's what it's called. And you can look up purple inks and see them kind of colors next to each other, but I've already done that and I've curated some for you. So first ones, I have shimmer options and non-shimmer options because your ink that you suggested, the Diamine Lilac Satin, that's a shimmer-tastic ink. So not only do you have the purple color in there, but you have shimmer to deal with as well. So I picked out some shimmer options and then some just non-shimmer if the shimmer is not that important to you, because you didn't say specifically if you wanted shimmer or not, but you already have it. So shimmer options, Ferris Wheel Press Blushing Mushroom. Now this is a less saturated and it's got a rose gold shimmer instead of silver. So it like leans a little warmer in color. So it might be like a little bit different, but it is lighter. So that's something to look at. Robert Oster Violet Clouds. This is a part of their Shake and Shimmy collection. So it's got shimmer, obviously, is why I put it in the shimmer list. And this says silver shimmer in it as well. So this might be a little bit closer and it's a little lighter in color. We have Robert Oster Violet Dreams. This is also part of Shake and Shimmy. This one's got gold shimmer in it though, so again, it's a little warmer, but it could be an option to consider. And then Ferris Wheel Press Moonbeam Meadows. Now this one is very interesting. It's a cool color. Maybe not as exact to what you're looking for, but it's got a duochrome pink and green in it. So if you're using it on a very ink-resistant paper, you're gonna have some characteristics that pop out that are like kind of weird. Not weird, but different than what you are currently using with your Diamine, but it's cool to look at least. Check it out. And then some non-shimmers. I feel like some of these were maybe a little bit closer in color. So if you're not married to the shimmer thing, then maybe try these out. Pilot Murasaki Shikabu. So this is an Iroshizuku ink. Great performing ink. It's definitely slightly lighter in color, maybe a bit more pink to it. So I don't know if I would consider it like a light lavender, but it's something to consider. It's a very good ink. Sailor Shikiori Fuji Sugata. So this, Sailor describes it as a pastel lavender. So I think this one would be a really, really good one for you to consider based on what you're looking for. And Sailor Ink Studio 150, very conventional ink. It's a less saturated hue. Leans maybe a little bit more towards a dusty purple, but maybe that's going in the direction that you like. So you can check that one out. And then last one I have for you is Sailor Shikiori Nadeshiko. Nothing really special about this. It's just the color, the hue is something that I think you should look at. So that's it for those. So hopefully that gives you something in the right direction. And then you asked about flex pens. So this really could be its own standalone question. I probably should have broken it out, but I'm just going to tack it on the end here. So when it comes to flex pens for newbies, I don't know if you mean like people new to flex pens or people new to fountain pens altogether. I would say if you're new to fountain pens altogether, maybe don't use a flex pen because it's kind of, until you like feel very confident, very solid about using, various types of nibs, and you've cleaned your pen a bunch of times, you've maybe had to troubleshoot just a little bit, just because you're going to end up doing all of that with flex nibs. So if you get into it too early, then you're going to end up not understanding whether you're having a problem with a pen or whether it's a problem with you just not knowing what you're doing. And that can be frustrating. Additionally frustrating, more than it already is going to be frustrating, Flex pens, they just require a lot of maintenance and a lot of, it requires more patience, more intentionality when writing and stuff like that. So, I would say first thing, like, don't rush to get into it too quickly. But, that said, when I got into fountain pens, flex pens were not that big a deal, or they weren't that available. I'll say it was only like vintage stuff. So I didn't really get into it because it wasn't really possible. Nowadays, though, they are more accessible. So it is easier for new people to get into them, which is awesome, but it can also be kind of frustrating. So, the ones that I think are probably some of the most accessible ones are the Noodler's pens. I mean, they've been that way ever since they were released like 15 years ago. It's not for everybody, and they are inexpensive, and, they don't feel like the nicest pens in the world, but they're pretty durable. They do have a smell to them, some of them. They're known for that. You'll see various things online if you go looking for them. Some people are big fans. Some people cannot stand them and can't stand the guy that makes them or whatever. But, they do make some very, very flexible pens at pretty affordable prices. So, I have to mention those. So I would maybe look at the Nib Creeper or the Conrad. I think those are probably two of the better ones to start out with. Nib Creeper just because it's really affordable. But the Conrad probably is like the most reliable all around, I would say. So I like that one. It's got ebonite feeds that are made for like really wet flow. And the nib slit is really, really deep, so that it flexes a lot. You're not going to worry about like overbending it or anything like that. And then if you're looking, kind of beyond that, there's probably some out there. I know there's some that we don't carry. But when you get into some of the other ones, steel nibs especially, it's pretty much going to be very similar between a lot of the brands. So a lot of the flex steel nibs especially from other brands are going to be similar because it's Jowo in Germany that makes them. They're kind of like a stock nib more or less that then, companies can brand and put on their own pens. So, if you're looking at Monteverde, Conklin, Esterbrook, Diplomat, Opus 88, Edison, our Goulet nibs, Delta, and Benu, those are all Jowo flex nibs. So they're all going to write pretty similar. Now the feeds might be different, the tuning might be a little bit different, but more or less the overall experience is going to be pretty similar on all of those. So pick whichever of any of those that you like. and they're going to write pretty similar enough to work with your flex. If you want to really step it up and just kind of like, some people just want to like buy the old last pen I want for the rest of my life, whatever, as the first one. The Magna Carta Mag 600, I would say, has like the best like real flex that you can get on a new pen these days. It's going to cost more. It's like $350, but it's pretty great. You're not going to get much of a better writing experience than that. And then Scribo is another one. This is really not starter at all because the pens are like 600 and up. But they make their own flex nibs, which write really well too. Not quite as drastic as the Magna Cartas, but very solid overall as well. So you can, take a look at that, use it as a baseline, whatever. But I think the Noodler's ones, or like maybe a Conklin or something like that, that's, on the more affordable end, that still has the flex. I could recommend either of those, like the Monteverde Ritma, maybe. That's a pretty decent one. So yeah, there you go. A lot packed into that question. Next one, Eileen Goldenberg 270 says, isn't that rubber sack pilot converter thing for cleaning not so good for holding ink? I usually use a cartridge that I refill with a syringe or a Con 40. I know they ship the pens with that rubber one. I'm not sure why. So I can show you what's going on here. So if you are talking about the Pilot Con B, I believe that's the name of it if you weren't familiar with that. So what I have here is I have a Pilot Metropolitan, which technically actually is called the Pilot MR. The Metropolitan, it's funny because they have it like in the little brochure here. The MR was just the name of the collection that they came out first. Then they came out with the Animal and the Retropop. So technically they're all MR. But, we started calling it Metropolitan because that's what we thought it was. And a bunch of other retailers, I'm sure, too. And it just kind of stuck. So there we go. Fun little fact there. But so in their material here, they don't actually reference that specific converter anywhere in here. Now, I will say the Pilot Parallel used to come with that same converter. I'll show you the converter just so you can see what I'm talking about in case you have no clue. It comes in the pen. but there it is. So it's got a little rubber bladder. You squeeze it, and it's got a bar that compresses it. You know, it's like an aerometric style or a squeeze converter, bladder converter, a bunch of different names. But that's the basic idea. You can refill it like it's a cartridge, of course, or you can just, you put it in the ink, you squeeze it, let it go, so when you squeeze it, it compresses it. When you let it go, it expands and draws ink up into the thing. That's how it works. But it doesn't say anything about this in the literature. It just comes with it, but in the parallel, they used to include this. They don't anymore. Now they include like this little bulb thing, this like blue bulb, thing which actually works a lot better as a cleaner than this thing does. But, even though they used to call this a cleaning converter in the parallel, they've never called it anything in the Metropolitan that I've been aware of. It just comes with it. So it functions just fine. Like this is what I use in all my Metropolitans. Now I will say this pen, if you're getting it in Europe, actually comes as a standard international. It doesn't come with the Pilot and Namiki, innards. It doesn't use Pilot Namiki cartridges or converters. So just that's a fun fact in case you're watching this from Europe and you're like, that doesn't look like mine at all. That would be why. It's because it's different. It's so much more of a standard to have standard international cartridges over there. They changed them. But here in the U.S., you can't get fountain pen stuff anywhere, so you have to order it online anyway. So they just make it the same way they make it in Japan. So yeah, there you go. That's the Pilot Con B. And let's see here. What was the actual question that you had in there? So really the crux of your question was, is it like an inferior converter because it's called the cleaning converter? Not really. I mean, it's not as robust maybe as some other converters could be. Pilot used to have a converter called the Con 20, which was a more robust squeeze converter, but they don't really make that or have that anymore. But even still, that was even more confusing back when they had two different squeeze converters. But either way, the Con 40 is the main converter. This one is called the Con B, but they never call it the Con B anywhere. But that's what it is. And just use it. I mean, it's just as bit every blah, blah, blah. Every bit as if I cannot speak English today. It's every bit, if not more, durable a converter than using a cartridge would be. So yeah, use it. Don't be shy about it. Knock yourself out. But that's what you get. Okay. All right. Question from Kutine says, I have a question for your next Q&A. What fountain pen content do you consume? Whether that is YouTube, podcasts, or some other source. Have any recommendations for us? I always look forward to Fridays for the Goulet Q&A. Cheers. Well, it is interesting because I probably have a very different situation than, I'm for sure I have a different situation than most people on this. I spend a huge portion of my time preparing, thinking about, editing, reviewing, whatever, publishing content on fountain pens. So, to be completely honest with you, I really don't always feel like consuming pen content in my spare time, right? I do it for work, and it's not that I don't enjoy fountain pens, but, it's nice for me to round out my knowledge with some other things in the world besides just fountain pens. So I don't consume fountain pen content at this point in my career, I guess, just for fun, mostly because, I have a couple of reasons. So one is I kind of want to unplug, and like if I'm watching other people's pen content, I'm basically working. I'm thinking about work. I'm thinking about products. I'm thinking about other things. So it's like it's really not an escape for me. It's just more work. It's work I love and enjoy, but it would be the same as like if you like your work too, but then on your drive home, you're like listening to somebody talking about what you do at your job. And it's like, no matter what that is, you're like, it doesn't feel quite the same as unplugging, like you would normally do. And I basically in my spare time, I'm like spending time with my family, playing music, and maybe doing some like woodworking, other things. But most of the content that I consume is related to like whatever hobby or interest that I'm working on right now in my personal life. So for me, it's like music. I watch a lot of like Rubik's Cube content and, woodworking and tractors and all kinds of stuff. When I learned how to weld, I watched a lot of welding stuff. Excuse me. Lately I've been learning how to play the drums, so I'm watching a lot of Drumeo and a lot of drum content right now. Learning how to play the saxophone, a better sax, and a bunch of other things. I do spend a lot of time with that type of content, but that's, I specifically am kind of veering away from pen content in my spare time. But I do sometimes, watch it. When I'm at work, I'm really not, especially I can't really listen to like other people's pen content while I'm working at work because it like jumbles in my brain. It's like I can listen to like some almost like background type music or something like that doesn't distract me, but I really can't listen to any like podcast or anything like that I'm trying to listen to and comprehend while I'm working. That I can do while I'm like mowing the lawn or going for a walk or washing the dishes, So while I'm at work, I'm not listening to that stuff. So, but, I will, consume content if it's about something that's like relevant, if it's like a new thing that's coming out, and somebody happens to get it ahead of time or something, or if it's, a brand that we're interested in and we're thinking about carrying, but we don't carry it, and we don't have a lot of experience with it, but we see there's other people that have reviewed it. That's always interesting. And I kind of watch that like more with an intended purpose to learn something about a given thing. Or sometimes if there's like an influential creator, not so much in the pen community, but maybe in a different community, that talks about fountain pens that they normally don't talk about fountain pens. And then I think like, oh, that's really interesting. Let me see what people outside our community are thinking about the fountain pen world. So I'll pay attention to that kind of stuff to see like the buzz and all that. That's the context that I do watch it. And then the other thing, this is an aspect that probably not as many of you can relate to as much. But basically, if I'm watching other people's content who, if it's a lot of the other people in the space are retailers or collaborate with retailers or something like that. And so in a way, there's like not like in a uber competitive way, but there's like a somewhat of a competitive or proprietary aspect to some of that. I definitely don't want to like take other people's content or content ideas. And that can be difficult if you're watching a bunch of other people's ideas and stuff like that. You can, either intentionally or just inadvertently borrow a bunch of ideas of stuff that other people are doing. And I really don't want to do that. I want to try and stay kind of fresh and distinct, and like I want to come up internally with our own ideas. So it's harder to really come up with our own fresh ideas if we're paying attention to like what everybody else is doing all the time. So in a way, it kind of helps creatively to, be a little more insular in that way, at least in terms of the fountain pen industry. Now I spend a lot of time looking at what people do in other industries, and I consume content in completely different facets than just in the pen community, and I can get inspiration and kind of borrow ideas from some concepts that they might do that's not competing in any way whatsoever. So I do find it, a little fresher to pay attention to what goes on outside the pen world and then try and bring it in and make it relevant. Also too, just like from it's very time consuming. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of creative energy to produce content. And, it can be very easy. It's also very vulnerable. So it can be very easy to get in your own head about that kind of stuff or compare yourself to what others are doing. I've been doing this long enough, and I've been very intentional about not trying to compare too much of what we do here directly with others in our industry. But still, there's a natural inclination to want to do that. So if we spend a lot of time consuming other people's content, it'd be very easy to either get jealous or, spend too much time paying attention to what other people are doing and then not as much time producing our own stuff. So really work hard to fight that tendency. And so just really focusing on what we do first is just best overall, I think. And then you also asked me, like, what are some good places to learn, especially if you're new to pens? This is where I'm going to kind of let you down because I don't pay that much attention to what other people do. So I don't necessarily know what are the best sources. So this is where I kind of wanted to open up, to the audience here, to all of you. Just post in the comments, places that you find that are helpful. Not just trying to like have everybody say us. If you're watching this, I assume that you find our content helpful. But if there's other creators out there, other influencers who you find that are helpful to learning on the path of getting into fountain pens, please share it here, because I think, it's like the rising tide raises all boats. I'm definitely for other people sharing fountain pen knowledge and love. But I also, I don't have like anybody particularly to endorse or anything like that. And I'm also just I'm not current, on who's keeping up with all that stuff. So leave it in the comments, and I'd love to share that. I'm out of time, and I'm not through it all. Dang. I've got to stop. I'll come back to it. Ta-da! I ran out of time yesterday and had to immediately stop. And I was not done yet with what I wanted to say. So I'm here the next day. Change of clothes. Stubble's a little bit more grown out. I gelled my hair. Totally forgot to yesterday. So yeah, here we go. My first multi-day recording of Q&A that I can remember. So we'll see. We'll see if I can pick up where I left off. But anyway, in case you're wondering what the heck just happened, that's what happened. So here we go, right? All right, this is from Octori. Hey, Brian, thank you for being my gateway into the fountain pen world. Happy to do it. I just had my TWSBI Eco ownership anniversary. Congratulations. I've been using Diamine Night Sky in this pen with a medium nib the entire time I've owned it, but now that it's a year old, I've had to clean it 3 times in the past month. I make sure to use my pen every day and agitate it so the shimmer doesn't get too comfortable in the nib or the feed. Why do you think all of a sudden I'm having flow issues? Do you have any other recommendations besides switching inks on how to alleviate my growing hardship? I thank you and your team again for all the hard work y'all do for the community. Much love. Well, thank you. I'm feeling the love. This is a good question, right? So I'm actually going to, show a little bit because I've got an Eco here. I don't have one that's like all clogged up, but I can at least kind of show you some different little aspects of what we're talking about here. So let's see here. It sounds like you're using it right. So first thing off, Diamine Night Sky, if you're not familiar with it, it's a Shimmertastic ink. And Diamine Shimmertastic, they put a pretty good amount of shimmer in there. Now I use an Eco, I have an Eco dedicated to Emerald of Chivor, which is a shimmering ink, but not as densely shimmered as the Diamine Shimmertastics. And that works great in that pen. But even still, it's like, shimmer is a particulate, and it is at some point probably going to start to clog up the pen and have some flow issues and stuff. So I'm actually kind of pleased with the fact that it's lasted you a year and haven't had a lot of flow issues. Now, I don't know what your normal cleaning schedule is. That's something you didn't mention in there. I'm going to assume that you clean it regularly, especially since you said you've cleaned it 3 times in the past month. But, one thing that can happen over time if you're using the same ink, if you're not, necessarily cleaning it every time, only when you have issues, that works fine for most inks. But there is that potential if you're using, pigmented ink or a shimmering ink, that the buildup can, because it's a physical buildup that's happening in there with the particulate, their potential is there for it to kind of build up and sort of like harden a little bit and not, get as much in suspension. You said you use it every day, so that is probably why it's lasted as long as it has, to be honest with you. But even still, just exposure to the air and things like that, eventually you can get a little bit of buildup that'll happen in that feed. That's probably what's happened. Regular cleaning will help with that, but even still, every now and then you might need a more thorough cleaning. So I suspect that's probably what's happening here. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. I'm going to show you with the Eco what that looks like. But before I do that, one thing I want to do is I want you to take a look at the ink, because if you've been using it every day, then it's very possible that the ink level, well, not possible, it's 100% sure that the ink level is lower in the bottle than it was when you first started using it. So one thing that can happen, and I've got, this is a bottle of Emerald of Chivor that I literally have here because I was just filming another video with it. If I flip it over and you look at the bottom, you can see the shimmer that's settled out. Now I shook this up yesterday afternoon, so it's been less than 24 hours, and a lot of the particulate is settled back out. Now, if you're a regular shimmer user, you probably are aware that you want to shake your bottle on a pretty regular basis, especially right before filling a pen, to get an even kind of distribution of all of the particulate that's in there into the ink. But I think what can happen, especially because, I mean, literally as I'm showing you here on the side, it's kind of hard to see, but if I kind of shake it a little bit, you can see how it's like kind of floating up in the ink a bit. Yeah, it might be hard to kind of capture on camera there, but you know, it's moving around. So, you know, as soon as you put it down, the particulate starts to settle back down. Now, a lot of it stays in suspension, but the heavier particulates, because it's not all hyper precisely, you know, the same size, I'm sure. Some of the heavier ones are gonna float down to the bottom. Over time, they all will sort of settle out, and then you have to really shake it up. If you've ever, you know, had a shimmering ink that sat there for like a couple of years and you haven't used it, and you pick it up, you got to shake it a pretty good amount to get all the stuff back in suspension. So I think what maybe happens sometimes is over prolonged use with a shimmering ink, you know, if you're not shaking it up every time, or maybe just some of it settles out a little bit more, what happens is you're taking more of the ink out, but as you're going lower in the bottle, as you're using up more of the ink, it's very possible that the ink that gets down to the lower level will have a higher concentration of particulate in it. You know, unless you've been super diligent about shaking it and filling it right away every time, you know, it's always kind of working against you a little bit. So it's very possible as you get down lower in the bottle that you're going to have more shimmer density than you do when you have a full bottle. So it's very possible that you may be experiencing some of that. So I don't know how full your bottle is, but I think it's very likely that you are experiencing these issues now. There's a potential theory of mine that you're experiencing this now because as the ink level's gotten lower, the density of the particulate in here has gotten higher, which means it's going to have kind of more of a tendency to clog. So what do you do about that? You know, one of the things that's probably the easiest thing for you to try, and I wouldn't necessarily do this with the whole bottle just in case it doesn't work, but maybe give it a good shake. You know, suck up with a syringe or an eyedropper filler or anything like that. You know, a couple of milliliters of ink. If you have an ink sample vial, you know, one of these little guys, you know, fill it a couple of milliliters with that with a freshly shaken batch of the ink from your bottle, and then try diluting it with a little bit of distilled water. What that'll do is that will sort of reconstitute a little bit. It'll balance out the concentration. If you have, you know, a lot of particulate in there, it'll help to dilute it just a skosh. That could potentially help to, you know, make it flow differently. And you know, there's other things in the ink, you know, like surfactants and, you know, sometimes glycerol and other things to help to keep things moving in there. But diluting the ink is a way that you can try, especially if you're having some like clog issues. It's a way you can sort of dilute it a little bit because the water is going to flow through better than shimmer would. So that is one thing you can try. And if you do it in a small concentration, you can test and see how much you can add. Does it enhance the performance of it at all? Does it lighten up the ink? You know, you don't want to add so much water that it ends up desaturating it and then changes the look of the ink, because that's probably not going to accomplish your goal either. But that's one thing you can try. If your pen is perfectly fine, perfectly clean, you feel confident about that, you may want to try diluting the ink a little bit and seeing if that makes a difference, especially if your ink level's gotten lower. This could be the case with other inks too, but I think especially with any ink with a particulate in it, pigmented or shimmering ink, that is something to take into consideration. You know, I find that you can do like a dilution of like 10% water and like 90% ink, and it won't change the color very much on most inks, especially Night Sky is a pretty concentrated ink. So I think you'd be okay there. When you get more into like the 25% dilution, then you might start to lighten up the color just a little bit, which I don't know, maybe you'll like that. I don't know. So that's one thing you can try. Let's see here. Shimmer ink, the shimmer stuff can build up in the pen over time. It can build up in the feed, you know, especially if it's not like a flex nib with a big open feed or something like that. You know, it's a relatively small channel, you know, and I've got an Eco here. This is the Blue Slate with Onyx, relatively new color. So I'm going to pull it out of here. And on the Eco, it's relatively easy to pull out of there. It does have to fit in, you know, kind of in a particular way to get the triangular part of the grip. But it does friction fit just kind of like in any direction in there, I believe. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So it's not that hard to pull out. You just want to be careful with the fins because they can be a little delicate. But if I pull that out of there, I don't know how well you can see, but it's a very, very fine channel right here, right? So, you know, it's a little thicker back here, but this is the channel that particulate has to run through in order to get to your nib. So it's really pretty fine. So it doesn't take a lot of buildup does start to have some flow issues. And when you're flushing the pen normally, so it's in here. Let's see here. Maybe it does need to fit in a certain way. Let me check. I can't remember with the Eco. No, I think it just kind of goes in there. There we go. Okay. So, you can see in there, you can see if there's buildup, on the outside, but it's on the underside where the nib is. You can't really tell. So the, where was I going with that? When you're flushing it, you're filling the pen, which is going to fill from, kind of under here. It's like the filler hole right here. But when you go to flush the pen, it's going to kind of push the water back out of that place because water is going to take the path of least resistance. So when you're just doing a regular flushing, if you do it enough times, it'll help a lot. And if you're doing it on a regular basis, that helps a lot too. But if you are really trying to do more of a restorative clean, just flushing over and over again, it's not channeling all that water through the top part of the feed where the ink is actually feeding through to the nib. Mostly the water is going to be flushing out around the filler hole. And so eventually it'll kind of work its way in there, but you have to flush it kind of a bunch of times in order to do that. So whenever there's like a more thorough cleaning needed, if it's possible on a particular pen, which it is on the Eco, I will always try to, see, it's really stuck in there. Maybe it does go back in a particular way. Sorry if I'm misinformed. Let's see what I can do. That's a good example for you all of what not to do sometimes. Maybe it does go back in a particular way and I kind of jammed it in there. That's very possible. Let me grab a grip so I don't just rip it open with my fingers. Let's see. Kind of rock it back and forth. There we go. Okay, no harm done. It just scared me a little bit. Okay, let's see here. I haven't removed the nib of an Eco in a minute. I feel like I did have to force it back in a little bit. Let me see if I can find a sweet spot. No, it feels pretty even all the way around. But anyway, so if you can remove the feed and the nib out of the pen, that's always going to get you a more thorough cleaning because then you could soak it, and get it directly in there. You can use something like a feed brush, toothbrush, and you can actually scrub it. There's nothing better than mechanically removing a particulate like that, like a shimmer. So being able to scrub it like that, the fibrous may not be able to work its way all the way down in there, but you're going to be able to get a lot more out of there than you could. So a combination of like soaking and then using this. Also pen flush is really good for cleaning shimmer out too. So if you have some pen flush or if you just want to use like dish soap, that will help a lot too. So you can just flush the pen over again with that, or you can use a brush to kind of scrub it. That'll really help to make sure you're like getting a thorough cleaning. But it sounds like, you might need a more thorough deep scrub. If you're cleaning it repeatedly in the last month and you're still having some issues with it. Okay, let's see here. Oh, maybe it does. Oh gosh, I can't remember how it has to fit in there. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. I think that'll do it. Okay. Yep. Right back in there. I think it fits in any which way, but you just got to make sure it's aligned, which I'm kind of, there we go. I got it back in order. So you may or may not be comfortable doing that on Eco. It's totally up to you. But anyway, that is how it's done. You kind of pull it out of there, and then you got to line it. You got to make sure your nib and your feed is kind of lined back up. If you're not comfortable doing that though, and you're not comfortable, that's fine. What you can do is I would do like either a pen flush or a dish soap or something like that in water. The pen flush, you can just use it straight. But the dish soap, you need to dilute with water. Suck it up in the pen and then kind of leave it sitting in there. If you have like a sample and you fill the flush with the sample, you can kind of leave it sitting in there, suck it through the pen, flush it a few times, and then just leave it sitting in there for a while. That will, in effect, allow it to soak and really clean out the feed without having to remove it all the way. It's still better to remove it, so if you need to mechanically scrub it, you can, but soaking it like that is kind of the next best thing. So give that a try just to make sure that you're getting a thorough cleaning. Another thing that you can do too is, because it's a TWSBI, you can use your wrench that comes with the pen. You can remove this out of here, and then you can use a bulb syringe, and you can flush it with a bulb syringe. That will allow just such a greater volume of flushing than it will just using the piston over and over again. And that is also a thing that can help. So if you want to just, flush it over and over and over and over again, that can also help to make sure that you're cleaning it thoroughly as well. Let's see here. What else did I have? So yeah, shimmer or dried ink, or like paper fibers, like anything. There's a lot of different things that can kind of build up in either the nib or the feed itself. So it's kind of like vacuuming your carpet. So I was eons ago, I was a certified carpet and upholstery cleaner. And people would ask, like, what's the best way to keep their carpets clean? And it was like regular vacuuming, So it's the kind of thing that, like, if you vacuum your carpet, weekly or twice a week, you can do it kind of quickly because the dirt hasn't had a chance to like work its way down into it yet. You're getting this stuff kind of off the surface. It's kind of the same thing, especially with like a shimmer ink. So if you're cleaning your pen more regularly, or even just honestly, you're using it, but as you're using it, you're flowing more particulate through it. So it's a little bit different with shimmer ink. But just with any other ink, cleaning it lightly on a more regular basis is better than doing, cleanings on a less regular basis. If you don't do it as often, you're going to have to do a thorough, more deep cleaning. Same thing with your carpets. If you never vacuum them, you're going to have to do a full extraction cleaning to get them looking kind of fresh again. Same kind of thing with your pens. So it's like if you have that buildup over time, or if you're using higher maintenance ink, you need to do a more thorough cleaning more often. But regular cleanings can help to keep it from getting to that point. But there are paper fibers that can build up in there because, paper over time, depending on the paper you're writing with, if it's a really smooth paper, it doesn't happen as often. But if you're using really fibrous paper, or like cotton paper or something like that, the fibers can get into the nib. That can cause flow issues as well. One way to help with that is a brass sheet. So this is very thin brass. You can use it. It's most ideal to do it, with the nib outside the pen, but a lot of times you don't want to remove it and stuff. I like to do it from the underside because then you don't worry about scratching the finish. It's not as big a deal on like just a regular stainless steel nib or a gold nib, but if you have a coated nib, like this is a black coated nib, but if I scratch this with the corner of the brass, I might scratch away the finish. So, I can feed it through there. That helps to get any junk out of the nib there, but it doesn't go all the way back there. So if I want to be careful, I can feed it in through the breather hole, and then I can sort of drag it down through the slit of the nib, and then that clears any junk that's out of there too. So that's what the brass sheet is for. We sell that. But that's another way that you can just make sure that you mechanically have removed stuff, at least out of the slit of the nib. And I guess theoretically, if you remove the nib out of there, you can use the brass sheet to sort of floss the feed channel too. I'm just realizing I've never actually tried that before. I guess maybe I've never needed to, but that is an option as well. If you got stuff that's like really built up in there, that could be an option for you as well. Okay, so that is all the like different cleaning things. Now you said you don't want to switch inks. That's totally fine. I'm going to recommend switching inks just for process of elimination purposes, right? So if you try using a different ink in your pen, clean it out, all that kind of stuff as thoroughly as you can. Try using a different ink in it that's not a shimmering ink. And if you feel like it's flowing great, then you're like, oh, maybe there is something with the ink that's changed a little bit. So that could be a way to try it. And then you could try inking up your Night Sky in a totally different pen that you have no flow problems with. And if you start to see flow problems in that pen, then it's like, okay, well, I've now switched the different things. I've eliminated some variables. And they can help you narrow down, like, if you change the inks and that ink performs just fine in another pen, but the pen that you've used a different ink in, your Eco, starts to have flow issues. It's like, okay, it's not the ink, it's the pen. Or it could be, honestly, kind of a combination of the two. But, just changing some things around like that, think of it like a scientist. It's like, let me change something, and then I have like a basis to compare it to. That can help you get to the source of maybe what the issue is. So let's see here. It could be, maybe the feed or the nib has, gotten a little bit out of alignment. I will say, typically over time as you're using a pen, your tendency is to write and to press down. So usually what you see over time, especially with gold nibs too, because they're a little softer, but with steel nibs, it can happen, especially if you write with a really heavy hand, is those tines can spring apart a little bit. And usually your line is going to write wider and you'll have increased flow It's not typical that as you write with it just normally that it would decrease the flow unless there's something kind of blocking it. But it could be that, if there's some kind of misalignment or something happening there, that it just might not be bringing as much ink to the nib. So that, just check the alignment, check to make sure that the nib, looks normal like it should. Yeah, those are the options I have. I think one of those will probably get you closer, if not solve the problem. But if it doesn't, you might be dealing with something a little more specific than I can troubleshoot just based on the question we got here. So I would encourage you to reach out to my team, email info@gouletpens.com, and we'll try to help you out in a more personal basis. So, but either way, hope you were able to learn something and gain something from all this. All right, last question we have for this week. This is number 5. This is from PanteraLaz1. It says, Brian, congratulations on getting Laban. Well, thank you very much. Question, can the Laban Skeleton be eyedropper converted? The clear body is asking to have some ink sloshing around in it. Yes, it is asking for it. And the answer technically is you could, but you probably shouldn't. So I've got a skeleton right here. This is the rainbow version. And anytime you're looking to eyedropper fill a pen, if you've got, trim rings or finials or something like that, that should be a bit of a red flag, because if there's multiple parts or components, even if they're glued in place, there could be a potential for leak or failure at some point. It's really best to eyedropper convert pens that are just a solid piece. Now, I can't really tell if this is actually one solid piece. I think you're dealing with a barrel here, and then the finial is a separate piece that's fitting on it. One test that you can do, a very quick and easy test to see if you can just eliminate it altogether, is if you just blow on the hole and give it some pressure in there. If you hear any noise or it sounds like air is escaping, well then obviously ink would escape too. So, I'm blowing on it pretty good, and it's not having any give. So that doesn't mean for sure it would be eyedropperable, but that's a good sign. You haven't eliminated it altogether. However, you could try it, sure. I would recommend, if you're testing it, do it with water first, so that if you do get a leak, you don't end up with ink everywhere, because I've definitely done that before. And usually what I find, I had this happen when I did this Sailor Food Data Men pens. So I tried eyedropper converting this. This is one too that it has a trim ring here, which gives you an indication that these are multiple pieces. I tried eyedropper converting it. I tried eyedropper converting a couple of them. One of them was fine. Another one started leaking out of here at the trim ring, and then it also wrote terribly, because once air gets in there, the air ink interchange, that balance isn't being held. So it's not going to write very well anyway. So wasn't able to do that with this pen. But didn't find that out until I actually inked it up and tried it, and then I got ink everywhere, and it was a huge mess. So try it with water first, and just leave it around, shake it around, stuff like that. Water finds a way. It takes the path of least resistance. So if there is any kind of a leak in here, it will come out. But it's possible that some people could do it and be perfectly fine. Other people it could not, especially if it's a separate part and it's glued in place, or it's friction fit or something. It might be that it's friction fit in a way that it is totally locked and totally enclosed. Or it could be that there's just a teeny little gap in there somewhere, and then ink will find its way through there eventually. However, even if you do that, even if it's fine, the other issue you have here is the grip section. So the grip section on this, it looks like typically what you see with grip sections like this is it's probably made of brass or some kind of metal like that, steel or brass, which are both corrodable. But then it might be coated with, some kind of chrome plating or something like that, which also can corrode. So ink itself, it's a combination of water. It also has salt in it. So if you're dealing with any type of aluminum, any type of regular steel, brass, copper, those can all corrode, especially with exposure to ink over a prolonged period of time. You'd be fine for a while, but eventually what might happen is the salt in that ink and the water could cause it to corrode. Now, it's normally not an issue, because when you're using a converter, none of that is touching it. It's all plastic inside the converter, and it's mating right up to the back of the feed. So it's not touching the metal at all. So that's why it's not an issue. But then you're thinking like, well, what about the nib? The nib's metal. Well, the nib is going to be stainless steel or titanium on some very random pens, or gold. None of those corrode with exposure to, ink. So you'd be fine there. And if you have all stainless steel components and stuff like that, okay, sure, that would be fine. But usually you're not dealing with stainless steel components on like a threaded section, because stainless steel is harder, it's more expensive, so typically that's not a part that is machined unless the pen is specifically made and advertised to be eyedropper convertible, and they know that it's going to be exposed like that. But on your average pen, that's not going to be necessarily an expense that they would do. For most people are not eyedropper converting their pens, so it would be an extra cost to do that, and perhaps not even necessary. So, if you've got resin threads and all that, then it's not an issue. But, if you've got a metal thread section, metal, grip or whatever that the ink would be in contact with eyedropper conversion, you'd be fine for a while, but eventually you're going to get some pitting and corrosion. And really the bigger issue, that's not going to look great. It's not going to be, good for the pen long term. But the bigger issue is if you get any type of corrosion and stuff, eventually it's going to like flake off. Stuff's going to get in the ink and then flow down through your feed. And that can cause clogging. It can cause problems. So in general, you just don't want to corrode parts of your pen if you can avoid it. So I would say on this one, stick to cartridges, stick to converters, and eyedropper is probably not something that you should do very often. You could do it a little bit, it'd be fine for exposure for a week or something like that if you just really wanted to see what it looked like, see what it did. But I wouldn't use that as like your primary method, because I do think over time you would start to get some corrosion issues. But anyway, it's a neat pen. I agree that it would look kind of cool, but you'll just have to use a cartridge or converter, and you can still see the ink in there, so it's not going to slosh around quite as much. So, but this is actually a good segue because I wanted to do a pen spotlight today on the Skeleton. So it's pretty fortuitous that you asked about this. And I put this as the last question on purpose so we could segue right into the pen spotlight of the Laban Skeleton and Formosa. So let's do that. All right. Well, I've already shown you the rainbow. I got two others right here. I got a rose gold and the gunmetal. And these are the three different finishes that we have. Now, I will say we picked up Laban. We picked up a selection of Laban. Laban makes a ton of different pen models. So what we have right now is a fairly limited selection. So we're open to feedback about any Laban pens you might be familiar with that you want to see us carry. So, we're starting with a limited selection, but the Skeleton's a really cool pen. So I wanted to just go over that a little bit and show you what the options are. And then I'm going to throw the Formosa in there too, because it's technically a different model name, but it's a Skeleton pen. It just doesn't have a clear body. It's got a resin in there that's really cool. So, and I left that one in the box. I have it right here. Ta-da! Because I want to unbox it and show you what the packaging looks like too. Of course, always subject to change, but I thought at least it'd be kind of cool to show you that since it's new and that's part of the experience, I guess. So start out here. We have three different Skeletons. The difference is really just the finish and then the nib color as well. So we have the rainbow one, which is a slight premium, I think, because just the process for making the rainbow finish, this iridescence, is a bit more expensive. So this is $240. Now this price is very subject to change because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, but at least that's what it is as of this recording. So it's really cool. It's like the rainbow kind of finish. Each one is going to look different because, it is somewhat randomized in terms of what the pattern looks like. I don't know exactly the process they use for this, but a lot of times it's PVD that's used for that. And, the rainbow color could look a little bit different. Pattern, it could be like slightly more yellow, slightly more purple or blue, depending on, it might be different parts of the pen. So that is something that you have to, and there's green in here too. It just looks really cool. But, there's like right here, it's like, I see a lot of yellow right where I would be holding the grip. Whereas, I might prefer to see that, but I can't really choose that. It's kind of like you get what you get sort of a thing. So the images we have are sort of representative, but each pen's gonna be a little bit different, which is kind of cool because then it's like unique to yours. But anyway, so number 6 nibs on these. Now I will say Laban uses both Bach and Jowo nibs. It depends on the pen. So I believe the 325 model, they're standardizing on Jowo. They've been using Bach for a long time. These still have the Bach nibs. You can sort of tell on the design because it's got the stamping on there, Laban, it's got the little, I don't know what you call those things. But it's got a different design to it. The Jowo ones look different. They're a little simpler. They don't have like the kind of filigree on the edges here. So they're a little more basic. But I personally, I mean, this is the subjective thing, but I personally like the Ovo nibs just a little bit better. But these are decent too, you know, so it's not like they're worlds apart different, but they do look a little bit different. So I wanted to point those out. So the rainbow one has stainless steel, you know, silver colored stainless steel nib. We have these available in, let's see here, what nib size is, watching me look at our website. Okay, yeah, extra fine, fine, and medium. Right at this moment, we don't have any of the mediums on these ones. We got the extra fine and fine. We will get mediums at some point though. So, you know, but extra fine and fine is much more popular size anyway. So yeah, you can check those out if you're familiar with Bach nibs, the way they write. It's going to write pretty much like that. Also, you could technically swap out the nib if you wanted to, if you pulled the nib out. Okay, what else was I going to do with that? It's not a super heavy pen. So I believe, you know, what they say is that you're using brass to make the metal part, and then they're, you know, coating it and whatnot, which, you know, that is a kind of a heavier metal. But in this application, it actually works pretty well because it means it's going to be fairly strong. You know, you're not going to have to worry about it because these pieces are kind of thin, right? I don't think you have to worry about them breaking off. I've never heard of that happening. But because, you know, a lot of the pen is resin, it's actually not as heavy as you would think. It's a very comfortable kind of daily writer. You know, it is postable. And actually the threading inside the cap here is resin. So it's not metal on metal. So, you know, I think, you know, it's pretty worthwhile. It's not super, super back heavy. It does change the weight a little bit, but it's not totally crazy. Like this is a very postable, writable pen for me at least. But it's also long enough where I wouldn't feel like I have to. You know, it's totally up to you. So the weight on the body alone is 19 grams, which is very good. Like that's about as much as a Lamy Safari is overall. Safari's maybe a little bit lighter, but you know, it's around like a Pilot Metropolitan. And then the overall weight for this is 36 grams. So that's a little bit heavier. The cap, you know, weighs close to as much as the body. But yeah, if you put the whole thing, 36 grams, it's meaningful. It's not heavy, but it's a pen you feel in your hand a little more than most, but still very doable for a daily writer. Let's see here. Standard international cartridge and converter, not eyedroppable, like I said. You know, the rainbow one's just a little bit of a premium. The other two, we've got a rose gold and then a gunmetal. So these are shiny, the rainbow ones and the rose gold, which look nice. They get a little fingerprinty, just like any shiny metal might. The rose gold one, they don't have rose gold nibs. So they put a two-tone nib on it, which you might be like, I'm not into that. I think it looks fine. It would, of course, be more ideal if the nib was more matchy-matchy, but it is what it is. So this has got the gold and then the silver edging on it, but still a stainless steel nib. Same nib size options available. And then we got the gunmetal, which is a little more of a matte finish. Now, I think this actually looks really good. And this has got the silver color stainless steel nib. So that one's a bit more matchy-matchy. That nib is probably the most dead on of the three of them. But yeah, and the weight's about the same for all three of them. The grip is nice. It's got a nice contour grip. I really like that feel of it. You might be thinking like, oh, metal grip, how's that going to work? I don't like that. I find metal grips like this to actually work pretty okay. You know, the slick ones, like on the rainbow and the rose gold, they can slip a little bit. I have really oily fingers. My hands are always warm. So, you know, I tend to slip a little bit on metal grips, but when it's concave like this, I find that to be okay because there's kind of like, you know, it's like a half pipe sort of. It's like, you know, it's not kind of the tendency to like slip off versus a pen like the Lamy Studio or something like that, where it's like a strong taper that just goes in one direction and it's slick metal. Those I find I have to reposition my fingers a little bit more. But these ones I think are okay, especially with the gunmetal, because the gunmetal has more of a matte finish to it. This one feels just fine. It feels, you know, the texture is going to be a little bit different than resin, but I find like the grippiness of it is more similar to like what a resin would be. So if you are concerned about that at all, the gunmetal one is going to be your choice. And then the other option that we have here, $224 for these two, $224 for the rose gold and the gunmetal. And then the other one that we have is the Formosa. right? So the Formosa, I have it in the packaging, but this is what the packaging looks like for all of these. So it looks really nice. Laban, refill your soul by writing. Sure. It's got like a little, I like the blue too. It's really nice. It's like a little, I don't know, like a little drawer that you pull out here, which is kind of cool. You can pull it all the way out if you want. You know, it's got some nice, like, okay, Laban, you know, pays homage to the mountains and seas and stuff like that. So here we go. Here's the Formosa. So also has the skeleton vibe. And I will say sometimes you'll get like a little sticker or something like that. It's not been entirely consistent with these pens, but it might have a little sticker in there from Laban. That happens sometimes. Don't be shocked if it does. And then the Formosa. So I think this might actually be my favorite of the bunch. So this is also a fingerprint magnet. So this is shiny silver actually. So this is silver plating, like real silver plating over top of brass. So this one has a little bit of weight to it. Let me see if the Formosa if it does weigh more than let's see here. The Formosa is the same price, at least, as the gunmetal and the rose gold. So that's cool, $224 on that one. Brass with silver plated overlay. Oh, I was looking at the weight. Overall weight, 36 grams. Okay, no, it's an optical illusion. So it actually does weigh the same amount. I guess that makes sense because it's just a different plating and that's a different resin. So well, there you go. I just think it just felt like it should weigh more, but optical illusion. So this one, okay, so you can see here the nib is different on this one. This actually has a JoWo nib, which is interesting. So if I compare the two, you can see a little bit of the difference. I don't know how obvious it is, but there is a difference there a little bit in the design of them. So yeah, that's sort of part of how you can tell. More simplistic design on the JoWo ones, but if that's for what that's worth, it matters to you. You can get a JoWo with this. Now here you've got slick metal, you got fingerprints. It's going to happen, but it's very comfortable. And one thing I was concerned about with these is like anytime you have like a skeleton type pattern or an overlay, is it going to feel sharp? Is it going to feel textured? Well, just with normal holding of the pen, I don't think you're going to be touching that at all. It's really when you're like capping and uncapping, you're going to feel that. But it's rounded over. It's not sharp at all. Now, any kind of skeleton you're going to have, if you're using like a cloth or something to wipe it off, you're going to feel more of that texture. It's going to grab a little bit. But I find it to be actually pretty comfortable. Yeah, I mean, you feel the texture, but it's not like a harsh texture, if that makes sense. The thread is very shallow as well, so the threading is really nice. It doesn't feel obstructive in any way. You know, and then it's postable and stuff as well, but it got a really good shine to it. And I imagine it's probably coated with something. Anytime there's like a silver, I'm always concerned, like, is it going to tarnish? Is it going to do whatever? But I think it's probably coated with something because, you know, I've handled some of these pens and, you know, pulling them out of the box and everything, you would see some tarnish starting to happen if it was just straight up raw silver exposed to the elements. I haven't seen that at all in this one. So I think it's you know, I've seen that with other pens like Visconti and stuff like that where they've done silver, but then it's like got some kind of coating on it so it won't corrode. I think that's what we got going on with this one. But it does look really nice. It looks really shiny. So that's cool. And then the resin underneath is really cool too. So it's like a blue with a lighter blue kind of swirl in it. It's a really tight swirl. It's not competing because like it could be noisy. It could compete with the overlay, but it doesn't. It just looks really solid. So that looks really neat. I like the look of it overall. This is just the one color. This is the Formosa. And it's not the exact same as the skeleton because if you look, the pattern is slightly different. You know, it's a little more density on the Formosa. It's a little more rounded, not quite as like angular jagged. So it is a different design, and you can see, especially on the cap, it's a little tighter. It's got, you know, some more stuff going on there. But in effect, you're getting a similar kind of look to it. But, you know, it is different, so they named it different. It's the Formosa, but you're still getting that kind of skeleton look. And overall, the size and dimensions and the weight and everything is basically identical. So I would kind of lump them all in the same category, and that's what I wanted to, you know, kind of show them all off. So there you go. And then I had one here. I think this one's actually Janaea's. She got one because she really liked it. I'll go ahead and ink it up super quick and just write with it. What nib size did she have on here? I think she had probably a broad. I think they have a broad as well, but broad is just not popular for us. I'm pretty sure it's a broad. But either way, I'm going to write with the one that you can't have. How about that? Isn't that so kind of me? So I'll do a little shimmer action. She's going to love it. She loves shimmer ink actually quite a bit. So I'll go ahead and ink it up. Good old EOC. And then I'll clean it out. Then she can just take it back. That is one thing is I've been trying to use a lot more pens in my videos, which is great, but it means I'm just cleaning pens incessantly. All right, so I'll ink this sucker up quite a bit. Boom. Okay. Wipe off my grip. You can tell I've used this paper towel more than once. It's becoming a bit of a rainbow of its own. All right, and then I like to wipe the lid of my bottle there, just to keep it from, the ink can like crust up over time. What am I doing? Put the body back on. Okay, here we go. How mean would it be if I just eyedropper converted Janae's pen and then gave it back to her? Oh yeah, it's like primed up and ready to go. All right, so this is, let's see here, Laban Skeleton and broad. Whoops, broad nib. This is wet. Very smooth, very smooth. And then let's see here. This is Jacarbon. Emerald of Chivor. Boom. There you go. Nice gusher. I find these nibs to be, they're Bach nibs. They're European nibs. So they're going to write a bit on the wetter side than, typically like your Japanese nibs or whatever. Feels very smooth. I dig it. My experience in writing with the other nib sizes, the extra fine and the fine medium, they're all pretty darn smooth. So they do a good job with those. And, for what these pens are, they're quite affordable as well. I got to be honest with you. That's part of what was appealing. They're made in Taiwan. So, that's why it's like with tariffs and stuff. Who knows what will happen with these in the near future. But for the time being, we're pretty excited. We committed to these before all this tariff stuff happened. But we're still living in that world. And so, overall, there you go. That's the Skeleton. It's pretty solid pens. Very interesting looking. And pretty affordable for what they are. So I think it's worth a look if you're interested. Now you can get all these at Goulet Pens. All right. Well, let me talk about my personal adventures, Brian's adventures, right? I haven't done anything too crazy in the last week. Been pretty busy with family stuff, but did have the mental health day on Friday last week, which was cool. I didn't feel like I needed it quite as much because I just came off vacation. What I really needed was just a little bit of catch-up time. So rest of the team had their day. It was great. I stayed after just a little bit because we had a little gap in videos. So I wanted to get the video out that you may or may not have seen already, but it's another relaxing style video, ASMR-ish style video where I used Emerald of Chivor and my beloved TWSBI Eco 580 Prussian Blue. Boom. So I reviewed those, show you what's up. Use a couple different nibs on there too. So I like this one. I like how it turned out. So I shot that and then I had some personal time. Ended up having to like drive my kids a whole bunch of places. So it was more like Uber driver-ish chauffeur. That was most of my afternoon, but still got to chill and do all that stuff. So that's cool. And I was able to, Rachel and I trade off on like the driving kids around. I usually do the morning stuff. She does the afternoon stuff. But to give her a break, I took all her afternoon stuff. So I just did all the driving and it's fine. I like driving. I drive, not too far from work, but I drive the kids into school and then I drive to work and it's, it's a good 45, 50 minutes of driving I do every morning. Then some in the afternoon too. So it's whenever I can help Rachel out, I try to do that. So she had a good mental health day. And it was great. I like driving the kids. They're at the age now where, 13 and 15, where it's like, driving time is nice because we get to listen to music. I let them pick the music. And then, they're like a captive audience. So I get to have good conversations with them, but we're sort of like staring ahead. We're not like, direct eye contact where it's like feels like it's a lot of pressure or whatever to talk about stuff. So I get to give good conversation with my kids in the car. So I enjoyed that. But let's see here. Oh yeah. And then I had a little bit of a freak out because, I shot that video. It's a dual cam video. So I shoot it kind of like I do with this setup here, where I've got my front facing camera and then my overhead one. I had wrapped up my shooting, it's probably like 2:30, something like that. And so I wanted to get home. Normally what I do is I upload all the footage, I throw it on the other computer. I'm normally on a laptop. So, if I do that, I have to keep it open and all that kind of stuff. So I'll throw it on one of the desktops we have here and upload, the video footage there. However, on this one, I was like, okay, I knew I needed to shoot the main video. And then what I do with that style of video is I do a voiceover recording after the fact, because I really can't multitask. If I was talking and doing stuff at the same time, it wouldn't be as visually compelling. Well, you see that all the time because that's what I do in Q&A. But in order to have that calm, relaxed pace and stuff like that, I like the style of doing it, recording it all and then doing a voiceover. So I recorded it all. I was going to do the voiceover at home, so that I could be with Rachel and just be around and stuff. So I did that, but I uploaded the footage from the overhead camera, which is my main shot for that style of video. I put it on my laptop and then I was gonna, throw it on the other computer so I could get it uploaded to the cloud for our editor. But I had the weirdest thing happen. I've never had this happen before. I've had file corruptions. I've had cards fail and stuff like that, because if you just do this long enough, it happens. But I put it on the computer. I uploaded it. It was fine on my laptop. But when I went to put it on the other computer, it wouldn't recognize the card. It had an error. Not only could it not read the file, it wouldn't even recognize the card. It wanted to initialize it and start it over. So some corruption happened in between when I loaded it on my laptop and then when I went to put it on the other computer. Thank goodness the file uploaded fully onto my computer, but then the card corrupted itself somehow. I ejected it. I did all the normal steps. Didn't do anything myself that would have caused that, but it just was a freak incident. And I've since reformatted it, tested and everything, and it is working fine now. But I'm like, what the heck happened? I've never had the card stop like that. I mean, I've had it corrupt like in the camera or something like that, so it's like I record something and then I go to upload it and it still recognizes the card as a drive, but like the file is corrupted or something like that. That's happened before, which is also frustrating. But this is the first time the card ever was just like, I'm not participating in this right now and had to be reformatted. But yeah, I would have lost all that footage had I not uploaded it to my laptop first, I guess. So I don't know. I got very fortunate on that because I'd done all the thing and it's like, I use a dual cam, but it wouldn't make sense just for the front facing camera for that style of video. So I was like, ooh boy, I'm really glad that I, had the separate recording. So that worked out well for me. So had a little bit of a freak out moment there and I had to do a bunch of testing with the card and all that kind of stuff, but I think we're in the clear now. So that was a nice little moment, a little behind the scenes thing. You would never know that happened, unless I told you, which I just did. And then let's see here. It is full on pollen season. As I mentioned before, it's atrocious. Richmond, where we live, is like very typically in like the top 10 worst cities to live in America for pollen and allergies. And we're feeling it. So that is still continuing, but also the grass is like really starting to grow now. So we're in full on like, yep, grass needs to be mowed every week with no exception or it just gets out of control. So did that, had to do some maintenance, had to sharpen all my mower blades, which there are several because I have a big mower. But yeah, my son mows our lawn now because he likes getting paid is what it is. But he's learning to appreciate the outdoors just a little bit. But yeah, so I was like, yeah, if you're going to do this, you're going to learn about some mower maintenance. So I taught him how to sharpen mower blades, which is cool, and how to like take them off the mower and all this kind of stuff. So it's just like simple stuff, which I learned that stuff from my dad. And some of that was like, I was around his age. I did not give a crap about it at the time. But, I just observed him doing it. I didn't even like sharpen it myself really at that age. And then once I started to have my own lawn and needed to maintain it and all that kind of stuff, I was like, how did my dad do it again? That's right. He helped me. And then I just had that knowledge there to draw upon. And then I was able to do it myself. So I was like, okay, here we go. As opposed to like buying new blades, which would be really expensive. So yeah, I taught him how to do that. And it's like, I could be laying some groundwork for his future stuff too. So it's fun, my kids being older now and realizing like, oh yeah, like there are some very legit life skills that I was building at that age that I still use today and have built upon. And so I'm like, anytime that I have a learning opportunity with my kids, I'm not being like annoying about it or like, shaming them or anything. I still let them be kids. But I'm like, hey, like painting his room, doing that kind of stuff, changing the oil in the car. I'm like, you don't have to have a great time doing this, but I want you to observe it being done, because if nothing else, it's good for you to just know how this is done. Even if you pay somebody to do it in the future, you need to know what they're doing, so that if they do a bad job or you feel like you're getting ripped off or something, you can at least recognize and know how it's supposed to be done. So I'm trying to do that kind of stuff, and then just like, lawn mowing, tons of weed pulling. Oh my gosh, the weeds are out of control. But anyway, that's boring weather stuff that, you have your own weather to deal with, and it's probably not that interesting to you, but it's a good portion of my time. So I'm talking about, I went to the dump, whatever. It's nothing that exciting, but, those are my adventures. And then, practicing a lot of drums. I think I've mentioned that I'm playing some more drums recently. I've always wanted to. I've played bass, electric guitar, all that kind of stuff, which I'm still playing all that stuff. I'm kind of driving Rachel crazy because she's like, do you just want to play everything? And I was like, yeah, kind of. I've always loved playing music. And I just had this realization, kind of during COVID, maybe post-COVID, like a year, a couple of years ago. But basically it's like when Rachel and I met, we were both so into music, and I played a bunch of instruments. But I was like, my dream, if money was no object and I had any option in the world, I would just like fill my house with instruments. I would get every instrument I possibly could, because I just love learning how to play new things. Well, I haven't gone that off the rails, but anytime I have a reasonable opportunity to be able to play an instrument, I just get really excited about it and want to do it. And it's cool because I can play like 11 different instruments now. And there's a lot of skills that transfer over to different instruments. So it's kind of getting easier to learn new ones because you're building upon a foundation already. And I'm not an old dog just yet. I'm getting there quickly, but I can still learn new tricks. So that's been fun. And so I've been playing a lot of drums, and actually had my first drum lesson, my first private lesson, I think ever. I'm self-taught with pretty much everything, other than like I was in band and choir in like high school, but it was never private instruction. I was just it was as a group, and we had like some instruction and stuff like that, but I never had private lessons for anything, I don't think. And so, this was my first, I'm here, I'm 40, almost 41, getting my first private music instruction, which was cool. I learned some tips, but I also learned that like, I'm not your average student. I come in and I'm like, I read music. I know rhythms. I need all this. I was in 2 different marching bands. So like starting out with drums, I'm like, I'm very familiar with a lot of these things, paradiddles and, flams and all these things. Like, I already know all that stuff. And it's like, okay, typically somebody starting out fresh doesn't have any of that knowledge. So it makes it easier to pick up. But anyway, so I did that. It was fun, but I'm also like, I can actually teach myself quite a lot. I mean, YouTube. I mean, obviously you're learning right now on YouTube. Well, you're not learning right now, but you've maybe learned something in this video so far about fountain pens. And it's like, I watch content like this. As I was just talking earlier about like, what type of content do I watch? I watch content where I want to learn, where I want to learn things. So I watch a lot of that. I watch a lot of science and history and that type of stuff, which is funny because like I didn't enjoy school very much. And now I'm basically I watch educational content for fun. It's just a different format, right? So anyway, that's what I'm doing. Having a good time, playing music. It's really cool. So to go back to like the whole thing when I was younger, it's like, I want to play a bunch of instruments. Obviously I have a family and stuff like that to consider, and there's financial ramifications for all these things, but also like you can get some basic instruments for not an exorbitant amount of money. And again, I'm not like a rock star here. I don't need like the nicest stuff. I can get some good value level kind of basics things, and play them. So I've got a little electronic drum set, starter set, but I'm just learning the basics. So it works just fine for me. So it's pretty cool. I'm just enjoying being in the phase of life. I have more, I shouldn't say I have more money than time. I have less time than I have money. When you're young, you have all the time in the world, but you don't have any money. So I struggled to learn instruments, especially bass instruments like sousaphone. You're not going to buy a sousaphone. It's ridiculous. They cost like $7,000, so you play it at the school or whatever that you can. But now it's like, okay, an electronic drum set, relatively affordable, things like that. The Barry sax was actually the most expensive of any of the instruments I have. But yeah, anyway, so having a good time with that. And so, yeah, all you musicians out there, I love it. Y'all are my people. All right. That's it for the personal stuff. We'll go ahead and do the wrap-up segment, and then I got some fun facts for the week about pollen. Yay. But it's entertaining, I promise. So I just want to thank you for watching. Leave me some comments, ask me more questions. Sometimes it's funny, as many of these as I've done, people they'll ask me the question of like, where do I ask you questions? I'm like, you're literally doing it right now. Ask the questions here. So yeah, you can just literally ask the comments on YouTube. That is basically how I check it. We'll also prompt every now and then on Instagram, and ask, or do like a community post on YouTube or something, but just asking it right here in the comments. Ask me questions for future episodes and we'll keep it going. So anyway, check out gouletpens.com, all the things that we've talked about here, self-plug, but you can subscribe to our YouTube, TikTok. TikTok is like totally up in the air as to whatever it is right now. And we're on Instagram as well. So yeah, there's all that. And then my fun facts, for the facts, plural, is about pollen. Pollen really kind of stinks for those of us with allergies, especially if you live, anywhere in the, southeast or, of the U.S. Pollen's very heavy right now. But there's some interesting things about pollen that might make it a bit more tolerable, or at least interesting. Pollen helps us look back in time. Pollen grains are commonly found in geological sediments, both new and ancient. This means that fossilized pollen can provide valuable information about the origin and the geologic history of plant life. Paleobiologists can study extinct vegetation, and sometimes this reveals surprising evidence about the age of plant species. So that's kind of cool. Pollen can also help fight crime. So palynological, some new word to me, palynological studies using living non-fossilized pollen samples can be useful when it comes to criminal investigation. It is possible to match pollen samples from sources, such as hair or clothes, with that found at a crime scene. Pollen can stick to clothes and other objects even after washing, which is great for all of you with allergies. It's also useful for establishing a location or a seasonal time frame for crime scenes. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Also, a little fun fact here, alcohol worsens the effects of pollen. So beer, wine, and other spirits can increase nasal congestion and contain histamine, the chemical that sets off allergy symptoms in the body in the first place. So if you have a lot of allergen symptoms, maybe be conscious about your alcohol consumption, because it could be making it worse. And then last fact, we associate pollen with the color yellow, but pollen can come in many vibrant colors, including red, purple, white, and brown. Since insect pollinators such as bees can't see red, plants produce yellow or sometimes blue pollen to attract them. This is why most plants have yellow pollen, but there are some exceptions. For instance, birds and butterflies are attracted to red colors. So some plants produce red pollen to attract these organisms. So interesting. There's just so much about nature to learn and appreciate. Even if it's something as annoying as pollen, obviously pollen is crucial to things, plants reproducing in the world. So just thought it'd be interesting to have some kind of different facts in there than ones that feel miserable. So anyway, that's all I got for this week. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back next week with more. Thanks for watching, and ride on.